What the appearance of Callear signified, the applause continued and waxed. "Good old Callear!" The hoarse shouts succeeded each other. "Good old Machin!" "Anyhow," said Denry, when the storm was stilled, "we've got him here, without either steam engines or His Majesty. Will the Directors of the club accept him?" "And what about the transfer?" Councillor Barlow demanded. "Would you accept him and try another season if you could get him free?" Denry retorted. Councillor Barlow always knew his mind, and was never afraid to let other people share that knowledge. "Yes," he said. "Then I will see that you have the transfer free." "But what about York?" "I have settled with York provisionally," said Denry. "That's my affair. I have returned from York to day. Leave all that to me. This town has had many benefactors, far more important than myself, but I shall be able to claim this originality. I'm the first to make a present of a live man to the town. Gentlemen, Mr. Mayor, I venture to call for 3 cheers for the greatest centre forward in England, our fellow townsman." The scene, as the Signal said, was unique. And at the Sports Club and the other clubs afterwards, men said to each other: "No one but him would have thought of bringing Callear over specially and showing him on the platform. That's cost him above twopence, that has." 2 days later a letter appeared in the Signal, signed "Fiat Justitia," suggesting that Denry, as some reward for his public spirit, ought to be the next Mayor of Bursley in place of Alderman Bloor, deceased. The letter urged that he would make an admirable Mayor, the sort of Mayor the old town wanted in order to wake it up, and also it pointed out that Denry would be the youngest Mayor that Bursley had ever had, and probably the youngest Mayor in England that year. The sentiment in the last idea appealed to the town. The town decided that it would positively like to have the youngest Mayor it had ever had, and probably the youngest Mayor in England that year. The Signal printed dozens of letters on the subject. When the Council met, more informally than formally, to choose a chief magistrate in place of the dead alderman, several councillors urged that what Bursley wanted was a young and popular Mayor, and, in fine, Councillor Barlow was shelved for a year. On the choice being published, the entire town said: "Now we shall have a mayoralty, and don't you forget it." And Denry said to Nellie: "You'll be Mayoress to the youngest Mayor, etc., my child, and it's cost me, including hotel and travelling expenses, £811 6 and 7." 3. The rightness of the Council in selecting Denry as Mayor was confirmed in a singular manner by the behaviour of the football and of Callear at the opening match of the season. It was a philanthropic match between Bursley and Axe, for the benefit of a county orphanage, and according to the custom of such matches, the ball was formally kicked off by a celebrity, a pillar of society. The ceremony of kicking off has no sporting significance. The celebrity merely, with gentleness, propels the ball out of the white circle and then flies for his life from the mêlée. But it is supposed to add to the moral splendour of the game. In the present instance the posters said: "Kick off at 3:45 by Councillor E.H. Machin, Mayor Designate." And indeed no other celebrity could have been decently selected. On the fine afternoon of the match, Denry therefore discovered himself with a new football at his toes, a silk hat on his head, and 22 Herculean players menacing him in attitudes expressive of an intention to murder him. Bursley had lost the toss, and hence Denry had to kick towards the Bursley goal. As the Signal said, he "dispatched the sphere" straight into the keeping of Callear, who, as centre forward, was facing him, and Callear was dodging down the field with it before the Axe players had finished admiring Denry's effrontery. Every reader will remember with a thrill the historic match in which the immortal Jimmy Brown, on the last occasion when he captained Blackburn Rovers, dribbled the ball himself down the length of the field, scored a goal, and went home with the English Cup under his arm. Callear evidently intended to imitate the feat. He was entirely wrong. Dribbling tactics had been killed for ever years before by Preston North End, who invented the "passing" game. Yet Callear went on, and good luck seemed to float over him like a cherub. Finally he shot, a wild high shot, But there was an adverse wind, which dragged the ball down, swept it round, and blew it into the net. The first goal had been scored in 20 seconds. It was also the last in the match. Callear's reputation was established. Useless for solemn experts to point out that he had simply been larking for the gallery, and that the result was a shocking fluke. Callear's reputation was established. He became at once the idol of the populace. As Denry walked gingerly off the field to the grand stand, he too was loudly cheered, and he could not help feeling that somehow it was he who had scored that goal; and although nobody uttered the precise thought, most people did secretly think, as they gazed at the triumphant Denry, that a man who had triumphed like that, because he triumphed like that, was the right sort of man to be mayor, the kind of man they needed. Denry became identified with the highest class of local football. This fact led to a curious crisis in the history of municipal manners. On Corporation Sunday the mayor walks to church, preceded by the mace, and followed by the aldermen and councillors, the borough officials, the volunteers, and the fire brigade. After all these, in the procession, come individuals known as prominent citizens. Now the first and second 11s of the Bursley Football Club, headed by Callear, expressed their desire to occupy a place in Denry's mayoral procession. They felt that some public acknowledgment was due to the mayor for his services to the national sport. Denry instantly agreed with thanks. The notion seemed to him entirely admirable. Then some unfortunately inspired parson wrote to the Signal to protest against professional footballers following the chief magistrate of the borough to church. His arguments were that such a thing was unheard of, and that football was the cause of a great deal of evil gambling. Some people were inclined to agree with the protest, until Denry wrote to the Signal and put a few questions. Was Bursley proud of its football team? Or was Bursley ashamed of its football team? Was the practice of football incompatible with good citizenship? Was there anything dishonourable in playing football? Ought professional footballers to be considered as social pariahs? Was there any class of beings to whom the churches ought to be closed? The parson foundered in a storm of opprobrium, scorn, and ironic laughter. Though the town laughed, it only laughed to hide its disgust of the parson. People began to wonder whether the teams would attend in costume, carrying the football between them on a charger as a symbol. No such multitudes ever greeted a mayoral procession in Bursley before. The footballers, however, appeared in ordinary costume, many of them in frock coats, but they wore neckties of the club colours, a device which was agreed to be in the nicest taste. St Luke's Church was crowded, and what is stranger, the churchyard was also crowded. The church barely held the procession itself and the ladies who, by influence, had been accommodated with seats in advance. Thousands of persons filled the churchyard, and to prevent them from crushing into the packed fane and bursting it at its weakest point, the apse, the doors had to be locked and guarded. 4 women swooned during the service. Neither Mrs Machin senior nor Nellie was among the 4. It was the first time that anyone had been known to swoon at a religious service held in November. This fact alone gave a tremendous prestige to Denry's morality. When, with Nellie on his arm, he emerged from the church to the thunders of the organ, the greeting which he received in the churchyard, though the solemnity of the occasion forbade clapping, lacked naught in brilliance and efficacy. The real point and delight of that Corporation Sunday was not fully appreciated till later. It had been expected that the collection after the sermon would be much larger than usual, because the congregation was much larger than usual. But the churchwardens were startled to find it 4 times as large as usual. They were further startled to find only 3 threepenny bits amongst all the coins. This singularity led to comment and to note comparing. Everybody had noticed for weeks past a growing dearth of threepenny bits. Indeed, threepenny bits had practically vanished from circulation in the Five Towns. On the Monday it became known that the clerks of the various branches of the Universal Thrift Club Limited had paid into the banks enormous and unparalleled quantities of threepenny bits. And for at least a week afterwards everybody paid for everything in threepenny bits. and the piquant news passed from mouth to mouth that Denry, to the simple end of ensuring a thumping collection